Energy transition, industrial expansion, and national security, analyzing the nature of problems and division, actionable solutions. We're very pleased that we have our esteemed panelists with us tonight. Our speakers for this session are Dr. Dipak Gyawali, Academician, Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, former Minister of Water Resources, Nepal. Dr. Sakib bin Amin, Professor, Department of Economics, North-South University. Dr. Mushtaq Khan, Professor of Economics, SOAS, University of London. Dr. A.K. Enamul Haq, Director of General Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies. And Mr. Zakir Hussain Khan, Chief Executive, Change Initiative. So without further ado, I now hand over the session to our moderator, Dr. Mushtaq Khan, to conduct the session. Thank you, sir.
We are going through energy transition from globally and also in the region. And that comes around few things beyond our power. Okay. One of them is climate change. Now, I've always said that climate change is a problem that was created by the energy sector, burning too much fossil fuel. But the impact of society is through the water sector. Too much water, too little water. I said this in the morning, you know that. Okay. Now, we need to make the energy transition, especially a country like Nepal, whose climate footprint, the carbon footprint is very low, not so much for climate reasons, because there's little that we can contribute by completely, we're already very renewable with hydro. We have to do it for economic reasons, to make sure that our vehicles no longer use fossil fuel. Okay? Now, in that, there is a very significant development in Nepal that's happening in the last 2 years, which is that last year, 72% of all the vehicles imported into Nepal were electric. And the reason has nothing to do with government policy. It has to do with the fact that it turns out, for an average person owning a car, or ordinary car in Kathmandu, running it on petrol means you spend about, let's say, 30,000 rupees of petrol a month. Running it on electric and charging it with hydroelectricity, renewable of Nepal, would cost you only 6,000. Now, the difference of 30,000 to 6,000 is significant, and that's what's driving this move towards electric vehicles in Nepal. The battery problem is another problem that we'll have to solve when we get there. Another factor of the transition is that solar has become cheaper than hydro. And way cheaper if you put it all the externalized cost on fossil fuel, obviously. But the fact that solar has become cheaper and is getting to be even cheaper by the year really means that every other energy source now is under competition with solar. Problem with solar is sun only shines for 67 hours a day. What do you do with the rest of the time? What this is doing in Nepal is putting pressure now on hydro developers, because conventional hydro development of building a dam and running the water through a turbine and all is out because of the solar pressure. It cannot compete with solar. However, marrying solar and hydro into pump storage hydro, what we call pump storage hydro, which is using the excess electricity during off period or even during sunlight hours or other off-peak hours, by using that electricity, cheap electricity, to pump water up it, store it there, and use it during the peak period, really means that now hydro development has to shift away from conventional development of dams and powerhouses. It would have to shift to pump storage hydro. And this is a major transition going on, and it has severe social consequences because pump storage hydro has far lower environmental footprint than the conventional hydro. Okay. Then the other thing, the question now we're having to ask is, why do we need energy, and especially electricity? And the debate in Nepal furious is it for export or is it for industrialization? There's a study done by USAID when I was minister in 2003. They did a very good study which showed that if Nepal exported electricity to India, it would earn 6 cents. That's what it was. Actually, it's 4 cents now. They did give us a price of evaluation of Nepali rupee. But if Nepal used that same electricity within Nepal to run its industries, to industrialize, it would earn 86 cents. So the question is, would you want to export to India and give that 80-cent extra benefit to India for industrializing, or would you want to develop for your own industry? This point has become more acute in what I this morning called the age of Trump Tandav. Is that now globalization is ending and we are heading for the age of localization to some degree or the other. We don't know what it will look like, which means we have to now be able to power our own industries for the production of basic necessities. I'm not talking about Nepal making iPhones tomorrow. We're talking about basic clothing, shelter, food, etc. Okay, and now our energy, we do energy service across Nepal, and we have found out another factor. So far, electricity policy was coverage, and Nepal has achieved the remarkable success of 98.2% coverage across Nepal, which means every house is kept in a tank, except 2% of kids. However, the issue now no longer is coverage. It turns out even where electricity has reached a village, now there's nobody to light or use that electricity for lighting because people are migrating out of the villages. Going to the Gulf country for jobs and God knows what else, are going to cities. So what do you need electricity for? So what it is coming out is, it's not so much coverage of electricity as quality of electricity. And our survey has shown that the quality of this massive expansion of the grid has led to low quality. There's a slight storm or something, electricity goes out. In an industrial zone of Nepalans in Nepal, we found out that on an average there is 35 outages in a week. Now let me tell you what that outage does. Light goes off then and comes back and they say 3 seconds or 5 seconds, whatever. Doesn't again. A HDP pipe manufacturing, we use that pipe for supply of cooking. HDP pipe manufacturing industry, once the electricity goes out and comes back after 3 seconds, loses that production raw material. It has to be thrown away. And it turns out across industries in Nepal, we don't call it load shedding, we call it chap, means like one chap out. Okay, chap, that's the word, Nepali word. That chap is costing industries 10 to 12% loss in raw material. Now add to that the loss in labor and everything else. And how do you expect your products to be competitive around the world? Yes. And finally, the last point I make is in this debate about export versus this thing. And there was a lot of shouting in Nepal that we exported. What last time Rizona was there, in Kathmandu, with this stuff. 38 megawatt of electricity to Bangladesh, I think it's a big set. What is 38 megawatts? And essentially India just allowed that to happen just to show that we Indians are nice guys. I think we're not. Okay, but it's not happening, okay? 38 megawatts, I mean, your loss of electricity must be 3,000 megawatts. Okay, so we forget the fact that India, for very right reasons, I don't blame the Indians for this, consider water and energy not as a market resource, but as a strategic resource. And for good reasons. The reason is water is needed for their agriculture. UP, Bihar and Bengal are, UP and Bihar especially, are land-rich water poor. And so what they need is place in the Nepal Himalaya to store that water of the monsoon and use it for irrigation during the dry season. It's a strategic resource. Okay. Similarly, electricity is a strategic resource to make Indian industries competitive, which means Nepal will never get a market price for electricity in exports. Currently, we are exporting at 4 rupees and importing from India at 12 rupees. It's not a very wise thing to do. Okay? And so we are in this transition kind of a stage where there's a severe need for rethinking what electricity and energy is for. And I'm glad that this debate has been started out with. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was, I think, an excellent introduction to the nature of the problem. Shall I pass on to Anam to continue this conversation?
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very good introduction on skills people, laying out the issues. I think when we look at energy transition, I see this was a very good issue, the one particularly in 38 megawatt export. This was an issue that I have been debating And I've told many times publicly, privately, that I don't know why all of our energy secretary has been traveling to Nepal to bring electricity from Nepal. Every time I meet someone is in the plane, what are you doing? Going to Nepal to bring electricity. Now, common sense should prevail. And this is the common sense is not working. You are bringing more than 1,000 kilometers of electricity from Nepal. I still do not understand. You're better off getting electricity from India, because otherwise you have to maintain all these electricity lines. So that discussion never came up. I thank you very much for that, because that's something important. But I think energy-wise, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Bhutan, except Bhutan, Nepal also partly. There is a problem. This whole region is one of the third largest economic region coming up in another 10 years' time. And it's an energy shortage region. The region has one issue that I want to flag in, which is it does not have any Rotterdam. Now, what is Rotterdam has to do? Rotterdam is the spot market from energy around the world in Europe. And it is Rotterdam, that energy market, that trading the whole energy supply story. Our problem is South Asia has only Singapore. And Singapore is far away from South Asia. So cost of energy, which is one of the biggest problems of South Asia, will remain a big problem. Unfortunately, we get it from Singapore and bring everywhere with small, what they call, cargo vessels. And that raises the cost. The better strategy for South Asia would have been to get a Rotterdam within South Asia. And one step that was there, the first step was in Sri Lanka. It failed. It failed because of the South Asian politics, honestly speaking, because Hambantota was the first port in South Asia that has ability to dock the biggest ship in the world, 20-meter draft. But it did not work because of the South Asian politics. So from energy, and South Asia will remain an energy importing region for many years. We don't expect South Asia to be energy exporting region. And the demand for energy will grow. The second issue which is in Bangladesh happening is solar. Well, I would talk about solar later on. The first one is wind, another mistake in the politics of energy. Bangladesh is at the end of a funnel. What is this? If you look at the Bay of Bengal, all the wind comes and stops at Bangladesh. So Bangladesh will never get the right wind for running what we call wind energy, which is possible in Deccan, in the Indian South, which is not possible in Bangladesh. But we have been spending money on this. First mistake was Kutubia project. 50 plus wind mills were stuck in were not there, but didn't work. Second is in Cox's Bazar. We have huge loan taken, and if you go Cox's Bazar, they will say it's not working. So we should have thought carefully about renewable energy. Solar is the one that is actually cheaper, as I mentioned. Solar is now competing, but only during the daytime. The biggest problem with solar is night time, which is our peak hour is from 7 o'clock till 11 o'clock. That's our highest peak time, for which we need to make changes in the policy. Can we change it? That's a different question. But at the same time, if we look at it, I would, for the transition of energy transition in South Asia, I think we should actively look for opportunities to make even Bangladesh could be a good hub for Rotterdam. What I mean that South Asia will need energy imported. We need an auction market in South Asia. And there are different kinds of energy that will be sold in different parts. In order to use, take an example, South Asia will import LNG for many, many years. Where is the auction for LNG? It's not in South Asia. Like Singapore is the only one. So the question is, we should have thought about all this, and Bangladesh could easily do it. Why? Because Bangladesh has a gas pipeline linked everywhere. So it could be, we should have thought about this as a strategy, not necessarily for Bangladesh, but for the whole South Asia. This could have been a very good strategy. We have never thought about it. So we should think carefully. On the industrial side, I think I agree with our Nepalese colleague, is that the biggest problem now is the quality of electricity. No longer the electricity. Coverage in Bangladesh is also very high, but it's the quality of electricity that becomes a problem. And with the quality, his problem is one, our problem is with the spinning mills. If it stops at the middle of the electricity scenario, the whole textile is gone. So what we have done, we have captive energy market, which means we are now giving in industries gas line and said, you produce it. What is the impact? Our average profit is going down. Captive energy cost is higher. The higher is the electricity production capacity, lower is the average cost. So captive energy is a very small unit, and the cost of their production is high. So we will be facing competitive cost in terms of our government's exports also. That is another issue that we should be careful, because we should think about not captive energy, using the gas to make bigger power plant. This is an important issue for us. Another issue that is coming in Bangladesh is that Bangladesh economy is gradually expanding at a very faster rate. Doesn't matter how you see it, there are urban demand coming and there are industrial demand will come. So our energy production should be distributed with the right basis. So take an example, we have built the biggest export processing zone in Chittagong, which is Mereshtarai, without electricity, without water. So our biggest zone is not working because we have not thought about it. So economic zones should be connected to the production side, and we said how to take it. So now in terms of thinking for the future, I think our energy demand and energy supply scenarios should be thought about. Now remember, energy sector was also one of the most corrupt sector in Bangladesh. Yeah, let's not forget about it. If you look at the energy corruption that is in Bangladesh, we have revised energy master plan in order to give what they call indemnity, and we gave indemnity. These were all master plan for corruption. So we should be very careful of this. We should have a second look and say, look, we should not create a euphoria or a feeling that everything will be gone because of no energy. There are countries, Japan is a very good example, without energy, without any internal source of energy surviving. So you need a strategic thinking. Our idea, and this is the problem, our idea is supply side, not the demand side. Economics theory will tell you have to think about both demand side and supply side, not just the supply side. The whole energy transition, that process that we have done is in the supply side intervention. And this supply side intervention led to significant corruption. The third point I want to put in, and this is probably for a discussion, is that our gas investment is not there. We have to think about, thinking gas is finished, which is probably true, the discovered gas is finished, but two things are there. Number one is that every gas field which we are saying finished, roughly 48% of the gas is still there, but we cannot extract because of technology. So we have to understand that we are sealing each gas scoop, for example, the gas field, and we are sealing it by 52% we are extracting, and then we are sealing it because we are hoping a future technology will come and we will be able to extract it later. So remember that we need to continuously invest and extract the upper layer of gas, which is easier to extract. But the lower layer of gas is costly, and technology is not in our hand. So remember that. So our gas is already there, but it is not 100% we're extracting. When you say it is finished, it means 52-53% is extracted. The rest, the coops are all sealed and left there. Now, who has invested? And this is something I want to bring in as a student of economics. We have contracted the investors, foreign investors, to invest in Bangladesh. Nothing wrong with it. We have contracted them, and our formula was 70% is their gas, 30% is our gas. So what does it mean? It means 70% gas, they sell it to us, and 30% we get free. That's how the 70-30. Once the investment cost is recovered, we will get 70 and they will get 30. That's the transitional formula that we have taken. The problem is, if you are buying gas from a foreign company, what price it will decide. Now, our energy experts, unfortunately, has said that if you are buying gas from a company, foreign company, you should, what is the price? Because there is no gas market itself. So the formula was that you look at Singapore price of crude oil, multiply with the energy content and gas content equivalent, use a physics formula, and pay the price equivalent of Singapore crude oil. And this was the formula that engineers have been preferring, because that's a very standard energy comparison. Which means to me as an economist that you are buying crude oil in the name of natural gas. Shall we? I would like to revise that as a strategy. Now, this is linked to something that people do not think seriously, which is, if you're selling gas, remember they have 70% gas. If you're selling gas, and if you're saying this 70% is mine, you have to offer a price. And since there is no auction market, they wanted prefixed price, otherwise they will never invest. Alternative strategy the whole world has taken allowed them to export. That you export. And if you allow them to export, they will export to where? To India. And will India give this crude oil price? Yep. So the answer is, you should have allowed strategically that why don't you export it? Use your own pipeline. They will come back to you and say, look, I will give you a better price. Come back. Otherwise, we are buying crude oil. What is the impact of that buying crude oil in the name of gas, we are buying crude oil? Our cost of electricity going up. Our subsidy on energy sector becoming bigger, and we are actually going to be in trouble financially. So answer is, we should have rethink about the whole product sharing contract, come back with a better strategy, not using the engineering formula, because it basically means buying crude oil from them. I would rather buy crude oil from Singapore because I'm paying the same price, and let them export it. Now, this is a outrageous word, like people will say, what are you saying? Even if I give you the strategy, the same strategy, I was part of the team when we asked the Canadian government what wanted when I was doing PhD. And they said, what is our strategy? So our university, I was part of the team. We said, let them export, but with a very simple formula. What is the formula? If you are exporting X amount, is the export, 10X should be stay in the reserve, which means you are guaranteeing 10 times reserve. Now, if the reserve goes down, very simple logic, that means the only way you can export the same amount is by expanding the reserve, which means investing on the gas field. We have never thought about it. We are talking about, it's like energy sector is dominated by energy experts who are using conversion. And if that is true, then our labor market should also get the American labor market price. Answer is, we don't talk about like this. Markets are separate and independent, and we should look into the demand and supply side to price. Thank you.
That was really informative, and we all learned a lot. I think we should pass on to Sakib at the end to add.
Good evening. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. It's an honor to share this stage with some distinguished energy economists. So, what I would actually like to say, we have some sort of loopholes in terms of designing transparent and accountable policies in the Bangladesh, also other South Asian countries. So, in Bangladesh, I would like to limit my discussion within the Bangladeshi context. So in Bangladesh, what we have witnessed, most of the times our policy has been actually designed based on an urgent, emergency to mitigate any sort of emergency crisis. But what I actually feel that policy should be, based, focusing on a widespread, stakeholders consultations, it should have a provision to regularly review, in terms of the technological advancement or the needs. So this part is completely missing actually. There are a lot of policy flaws we can, identify, but we did not find any sort of, attempt to overcome the barriers of those sort of policy loopholes. We have seen that lots of master plans, integrated plans, data plans. But what I have found that there was no discussion regarding the optimal fuel mix in terms of the renewable energy transition. There was no guideline. Where does the funding coming from? We're talking about within 2020 we're going to have 10% from renewables. Within the 2030 we're going to have 20% of renewables. But it should be clearly specified in the master plan or any sort of energy plan, regarding the optimal fuel mix, and also clear guidelines where does we can actually secure the funding. There should be provisions. And then another thing, in terms of energy transition, there is no particular discussion, none of the actually policy adopted by Bangladesh in the last 15-16 years. And as announcer has already mentioned, there should be a proper matching in terms of efficient supply side management and the demand side forecasting. So if you look at the demand forecasting, we still actually focused on the Zyka. They're sort of based on their estimation, we are going to provide the supply. So it's heavily actually we have something to say. We have failed to create a solid actually human resource base for our country. If we look at the labor force survey, around in the energy sector, only 25% actually laborers are classified as high skilled energy. So is a time we have to actually create a strong skill base for the energy sector. Otherwise, we always need some sort of dependency, on the external countries. If you look at the our BAPEX or any sort of other government institutions, we can see they are not fully capable in line with actually ensuring energy security to come up with any sort of actually policy formulation. So this is one of the areas I think we need to emphasize heavily in terms of actually creating a skilled labor force for the energy sector, developing a human resources. And then in terms of talking about the energy prices or tariffs, in Bangladesh or any other South Asian countries, we never actually ensure cost reflective pricing. It is very, very important. Price should reflect the cost. However, due to the large subsidies, we have always some sort of distortion in the market, price distortion. So I think it's very, very important actually to ensure cost reflective pricing mechanism. Otherwise, we never actually encourage the private investors to come into the country. And we know energy sector is highly capital intensive. The government sector cannot alone fulfill all the necessary required investment for this sector. So it's important to have some sort of mechanism which can consistent with the cost reflective pricing. Now the question is that who is going to ensure the cost reflective pricing? In principle, we should have an independent, in a true sense, independent regulatory commission. But what we have seen, we have the regulatory commission based on the, recommendation of the World Bank in the early 2000, we have established a regulatory commission, but actually they are simply communicating the message of the government. We have not seen regular, hearing process in the Bangladesh and also some of the other developing countries. So what I firmly believe that actually there should be an independent, regulatory commission which should include, representative from the academia, from the energy experts, from the financial analysts, from, root level participation. So then, through the widespread consultation, we can come up with a, policy, and the regulatory commission should be given some sort of indication through which policy, through which formula we are going to actually define the energy prices, and that needs to be further reviewed by some other expert. If required, we can also, depending on the situation, depending on the necessity, we can also think about, engaging some sort of regional experts, because we like to work together. We have huge potentials. Last year I went to, India to discuss on one of the, energy meeting, and we came to know that actually in the winter time, Bangladesh have 5,000 megawatt of extra, power. And Bhutan, they would like to actually import 5,000 of extra megawatt in the winter period. But we could not have that interaction. So it's very important to have actually a very strong regional integration bonding among the countries. Nepal has huge potential. As I has mentioned, actually it was IWAS. They're actually giving 40 megawatt actually, because that is nothing. Considering the huge potentials, it's a strong time, right time to have some sort of potentials in terms of developing a cross-border energy trading. Then moving on, when you wanted to attract the private investor, do we have any actually proper guideline for the private investors? I think that part is also missing. So we need to actually formulate guidelines for the private investor where it is clearly mentioned actually, to what extent they can invest their money in our country, there should be some sort of actually PSSR as mentioned, we need to revise the production sharing contract, and we also need to create accountability among the root level people, because energy policies sometimes it's very difficult to get access to different sort of data as well, because data is very important. If you wanted to do research on the energy sector, it's very important you get access to data. But if you look at the data, it's very surprising to see some sort of contradiction among the data coming from different wings. So I strongly encourage propose that we should have a database. So where that database can be regularly updated. Nowadays we can actually rely on the focus on the automation, smart technology, and automated software based data management could be on board for the region, for the country as well as. So it's very important you get access to data. Then also in the Bangladeshi perspective, we are always focusing on the supply side story. But demand side is also very important. It is easier to save 1 megawatt of energy rather than creating 1 megawatt of production, so electricity. So it's important we strongly emphasize on the demand side mechanism as well as you can promote the local entrepreneurs. You can provide all sort of fiscal and financial incentive to those local manufacturers who are actually using the energy efficient appliances. You can actually provide subsidy to the consumers who are using energy efficient appliances. I use a term which is called revenue neutral subsidy diversification. Right now we are providing subsidy to the fossil fuel. So why don't we take it's a revenue neutral mechanism. You take out some subsidy which is now dirty fuel and encourage and divert those subsidy to promote, encourage the users of energy efficient appliances. This is one thing we need to actually focus. And also we are still using decade old equipments. Our transmission system loss within that region, the Bangladesh, it's almost a double figure. It's 10%. If you look at the global average, it's around still 3%. So, you are trying to actually increase the production. But the question is that how we can accommodate those, how we can supply those electricity, maybe after 10 years, 40, 15 years, within these decade-old equipments. So there should be some sort of synchronization between generation, transmission, and distribution system. In Bangladesh, we have seen the private participation in the generation sector. They are still working, but we have not seen their participation in the transmission and distribution sector. So I think we can also think about the scenario how we can engage the private participation in the transmission and distribution sector in the future years. And we think about the right model to attract them, maybe BOT, which is called actually build, own, and transfer. So this is one of the model that you can attract, for the private investor. I think that's all from my part. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much. I think my problem is different. Basically, when I said to all my professors, dear professor, and also I'm the day student, the professor Amal Haqsa, and also I feel that Professor Mushtaq is also a mentor from different perspective. And I believe that there's so many things have been already discovered. Discovered on the, even the discovered in a sense that the Rotterdam of the South Asia, Bangladesh has a much more potential. It's really very much, it's a groundbreaking approach should be, because this is how we see in the last couple of decades. We are very much, enthusiastic about the foreign direct investment. But whenever it comes to the foreign direct investment, especially on the renewable energy sector, you see that almost 37 renewable energy projects suddenly has been postponed. One of the project was almost a $1 billion investment potential. And there are the allegation about the corruptions, but that should be dealt with the case by case. Because if there is no continuation of the policy decisions, and especially in terms of the foreign direct investment, and whenever any government changes,
it is always giving the wrong signal to the foreign direct investment, especially where actually our banking sector, financial sector almost in the collapse. So without foreign investment, we cannot think that our renewable energy sector would be expanded. So this is very important perspective we have to keep in mind. We know there's the funding commitment from the World IMF that is called RSF funding, $1.3 billion, and it was primarily discussed that at least half of the funds should be mobilized for the mitigation or the renewable energy sector, and also 750 million euro have been committed by the European Investment Bank. So we should have something potential to create a dedicated funding, at least $1 billion seed funding for the renewable energy. So still we don't see anything to do that. But at the same time, whenever it comes to the renewable energy sector and planning, we do all of the shifting. Whatever the government has planned, primarily decided that we will go for the 3,000 megawatt rooftop solar. Finally ended up with the target, and that was the target by 2030. So the recent update is that they have decided it should be between 2,000 to 3,000 megawatt, but there is no deadline at all. So again, whatever the current regime has been already in the power, they have already started to say that the 3.0 would be one of our core priority. And first zero is the zero carbon emission, which is really is a, I mean, it is not realistic at all. But what is important, we thought that the current government should have extra, the policy support and other support of the renewable energy. Unfortunately, that was not happening. The same corruption-driven, fossil fuel-based, the expansion has been going on. Earlier, it was more on coal-based. Now it has been expanded to the LNG-based, the expansion of the energy sector. But the problem is that energy is the lifeline of the economy. We cannot actually do a business with the blood or other human being. So something like that energy is that. Basically, the problem is that whole corruption has been concentrated, the mega corruption. It's two sides. One is the infrastructure side and another is the energy side. And whenever it comes to the fossil fuel, it has always the opportunity to make money through three forms. One is, as Professor Amsar has said, the spot market. There is always scope for the commission, the ransaking from the immediate purchase of the, the diesel and petrol from the fossil, the spot market. And second one is that without producing any electricity, you have an opportunity to enjoy the so-called capacity reserves. It is a Bangladeshi innovation of the corruption. And third thing is that whenever it comes to the purchasing electricity from the private sector, whenever you have a state capture, you can actually purchase electricity by the 3 times higher is the real price. Whenever you see the solar project of one of the solar the largest solar projects by the Baxenco is a Tista solar projects. It has purchased almost 3 to 5 times higher than real prices. So this is the fundamental problem. The energy sector should not be the money-making sector as well. So I believe that I'm not sure what the next government or whatever comes to the power, what would be their strategy, but I don't see any significant breakthrough on the energy sector really becoming more competitive. Especially, one particular perspective is that, still in terms of the energy sector, so many areas, especially in the Chittagong Hilltech or the our basins or some others, we can at least could try on the community, solar-based community grid. Because so many SMEs, even the cottage industries are really surviving, and even the wiped out due to high energy cost, and even 10 to 12 hours load shedding every day. So it has been really non-incompetitive for them to just produce any product and to survive. But we could at least try to fully, the community stewardship model could be applied for the community grids, where it is really tough for the public investment on the expansion of the transmission facility and that locations. So that could be the one of the
priority. And I will also, my observation is to just on the corruption issue. Whenever you have a go for the large, the generation process, I mean in the scope of the mega corruption. We should think about that. Can it just do something prototype model of the 50 megawatt, 30 megawatt, 20 megawatt PPS-based generation process, so that the corruption risk could be reduced in certain cases. And finally, I think this is the time, not the energy security, rather than I just, my first bit is that it should be the energy sovereignty. I'm not sure what we observe in the, the recent conflict in the Middle East, when it comes to the Iran versus another conflict. If anything happens in the Bay of Bengal, any the energy supply could be disrupted, what would be our energy security? So we should seriously think about that, to the focus on energy sovereignty, lands of for the any country like Bangladesh. We don't have much more money to just have to buy the 3 times, 2 times, and 3 times higher energy from the other sources. So, and finally, I would say that water stress has been really very much in the coming days is the reality. And the recent case, finally Pakistan has been compelled to, destroy their own dams. Whenever the India has suddenly just released the pressure of the water. So I don't see that dam would be in the coming days very good idea, because it might be in the mass destruction weapons, something like that. Because whenever anyone construct any dam, might be the capacity might be the 10 lakh or 12 lakh cubic of water, but the way the Himalayan glaciers are melting, you don't predict how much water would be really flow over the period in coming days. So might be certain states, if it goes beyond the capacity of the dam, it might suddenly, the wash away the whole economy of the whole local economy and also the natural resource itself. So we have to think how to go for the, the localized version of the renewable energy solutions, like the solar-based solution or other options we can think about that. We forget the very much potential of the biogas potential as well we have. So the problem is that the whole psyche of the energy sector is still in Bangladesh is very much corruption focused. That's why we don't explore the demand base or the feasible solution for the particular locality, rather than we always focus on the uniform or unique solutions for all sectors or all regions. So we should have to have design for the localized versions, and that is the only way to reduce the corruption risk, as well as to keep the demand side more accessible within the feasible, the affordable prices of the electricity. So I'm just stopping there. I believe that Professor Mushtaq will just conclude with his own insight. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think this has been a really wide-ranging and exciting discussion. I want to add some things to what people have said from a slightly different perspective. So just because there are a lot of students here, just to clarify the difference between energy and power. So energy refers to things that you burn, like gas, oil, or energy can also be solar or water. Power is the actual conversion of the energy into electricity. So power is the actual plant which is making the electricity which goes into the grid. Now, both of these are a huge problem in Bangladesh. And I'm going to concentrate more on the power side of it, because others have looked very well at the energy side. Now, one of the problems in Bangladesh over the last, actually forever, but the last 15 years in particular, has been the massive corruption and collusion in both the energy and power sector. This is not a small problem, it is the problem. It is actually the major problem. Now, the scale, so last 1 year I have been on the national committee on the power sector. So this was a committee set up under the power division, and we have been looking at all the power contracts in the last 15 years and looking at the irregularities in these contracts, the pricing of these contracts, and what to do about these contracts. And if I wasn't such an optimistic person, I would have been in deep depression. Because the scale of what has happened is totally and utterly unbelievable. And the way in which business and politicians and bureaucrats have captured the system, I'm afraid, even if you move to small scale, power plants, the big oligarchs will make the small scale power plants, right? So we have to really do something about the power of the oligarchs and the power of the politicians, because they can make the small ones, they can make the big ones, they will control it. We have to break. Just to give you an example of the scale of the corruption and what it has burdened the Bangladeshi taxpayers into the next 20, 30 years. We have generation capacity, just I'm giving broad round figures, okay? Generation capacity is 20,000 megawatts. We use around 9,000 megawatts. But we are paying capacity charges for 20,000 megawatts. Can you imagine? Right? So this is absurd. This is totally absurd. Normally a country will have 10%, 20% redundancy. It means that sometimes your plant is being repaired or your plant is out of order. You have to have some redundancy. No one has 110% redundancy. They have built power plants. Now, they have also built power plants in places which doesn't have an energy supply. That is, you do not have gas, but you have a power plant. Now, the idea of this power plant is simply to collect capacity charges. It cannot generate power. Okay? Now, you can say, regulations and rules, you can write whatever rules you want. This is in your face. And the paperwork is all good. So the process of commissioning a power plant, you have to go through a whole series of processes. The paperwork has to go to the Bangladesh Petroleum Corporation. They will have to approve that there is an energy supply, and they were very clever. So they will write something like, energy may be available. Now, may be available means nothing. It means that it's not available, and you build the power plant. We have built power plants where the energy is supposed to come from a floating barge which will put the gas into India, and then it will be piped to Bangladesh, and the pipe doesn't exist, but the plant has been built. It's not funny, you're paying for it. You are all paying for it. We are all going to be paying for it. Yes. We used to buy, and I am very much like our Nepali friend. India uses power and energy strategically. We have to be very careful about talking about integrated markets. It's a disaster. We used to buy electricity from India, from the Indian grid, at 3.8 cents. Then we signed the Adani contracts, which set up a dedicated plant in India, completely at our risk, Bangladesh paying the capacity charge. This plant is only supposed to generate power for Bangladesh. You would have thought it would be cheaper than buying from the grid. And you buy from the Indian grid at 3.8 cents, the levelized price, which means the price if it is using full capacity, was 8.6 cents. More than twice the price from the grid, and the actual price is more than 11 cents because it is not using full capacity. Can you imagine this? We have got power plants which is root, right? We have power plants which are generating solar power at what, 15 cents? We have gas plants which are I can go on. Now, what this means is that the last regime has bankrupted this country because these are 30-year contracts which are sovereign contracts. Okay? Sakib was saying, we have to, FDI. Yes, we will honor them as much as possible, but these are theft. This is theft. Now, The average price at which power is sold in Bangladesh, again very round figures averaging it out, is about 10 cents per unit. If you look at India, the price in India, on average, it varies from state to state, is around 8 cents per unit. This is the selling price. After all the markups of distribution companies, etc., 8 cents. The difference between 8 cents and 10 cents is 25%. But this is not all. We are selling at 10 cents because we are hiding the real cost of the generation with $500 million to $1 billion subsidy every year to the Power Development Board, which is buying expensive power and selling it at 10 cents. Now, we cannot afford this $1 billion subsidy a year, or $500 million. It depends on the oil prices and so on. And we have no money. The IMF has come to us and said, you have to remove this subsidy, which we agreed. We have to. Which means our price will go up from 10 cents to something like 13 or 14 cents. At that point, electricity will be 50% more expensive in Bangladesh than India. The price in Vietnam is about 7-8 cents, Indonesia 7-8 cents, Sri Lanka 6 cents. We will deindustrialize. There will be no industry in Bangladesh. You cannot buy power at 50 cents, 50% more than your competitors and be competitive. So when people ever say to you, Awami League did development, please give them a box on the nose, right? Because they have destroyed this country. Now what we are doing in the National Committee is we are looking at and looking for hard evidence of corruption, and we are finding it. And we are going to try to tear up these contracts on the grounds that they were corruptly awarded. So this might happen in the next 1 or 2 months. We hope it will happen. This is the only escape route. Because once you sign a sovereign contract, there is no other way of cancelling it. You try to cancel it, you will have to pay massive penalties, international courts. The only escape route is to show corruption, and that's why we have been working for 1 year to find all this evidence of corruption, and we are finding it. So we are doing it in a way that will stand up in international courts. Now, let's go back one step and say, why did this happen? And here is, you really need to have some knowledge of contracting and economics. The problem in the power and energy sector is that these are A, relatively big investments, and B, they are investments made over a long period of time, like 20 years or 10 years. So the investor is exposed to a lot of uncertainty. Now this is why the contracting of a power or energy contract must and always does involve something that economists call a risk premium. There is always a risk premium. Now this risk premium is not technocratically determined. This is why you cannot have a committee of experts telling you what is the price. The price is simply what will an investor will accept to invest in your country. Okay? So the risk premium has to be competitively determined. Now, the problem is this. The worse your rule of law, the more the corruption in your country is, the more the courts don't work, the higher your risk premium becomes. So the government can say, I will give you a sovereign contract, whatever price, but you are the investor, you think this is not a price they can afford, I'm not going to invest here. Then something even worse happens. Because the good investors drop out, it's something that economists call adverse selection. The only people who are left who are willing to invest are the politically connected investors. Because the politically connected investor can take that risk because they know that I will be paid. I will make a deal with the government and I will be paid first. So then when only the politically connected investors are left, you not only have the risk premium, you have a collusion premium on top of that. Because now I'm the only one left in the room. And I will dictate the price. Okay? Now, so when you have that, this is the situation we ended up in. So, because you are doing collusive pricing, because you have only one or two investors, that is why in 2010 the government passed the Speedy Power Act. We all know. The Speedy Power Act meant I'm not going to get multiple bidders, so I'm going to just go for one bidder, and then I'll give indemnity. No one can criticize that price. The 2010 Act is what allowed all this to happen. But remember, before the 2010 Act, no one was investing in the power sector in Bangladesh. There was a whole period of years when BNP was giving tender after tender, and no one was bidding. Why? Because the risk was too high, and other bidders were blocking them through political connections. So the idea that I will just give a competitive tender and people will bid won't work, because the risk of investing in a place like Bangladesh is very high. So we have to understand the 2010 Act was actually responding to a problem, but it institutionalized the problem into corruption. So therefore, our problem is how to crack the problem. You can't say, we have repealed the 2010 Act. One of the first things the government did when it came to power, there was a writ petition and they repealed the 2010 Act. Okay? Now there is no 2010 Act. But do you think good investors will come to invest in Bangladesh? They will not. If you give an open tender, again you will have the politically connected companies who will do the toothpill sitting in the power division, they will do toothpill with the minister, and they will set the price. Toothpill means, this bargaining behind the scenes, right? So they will do, and they will say, this is already happening in the current government. Toothpill is happening in the current government. Why? Because very few politically unconnected investors will invest in Bangladesh. So if you really want to crack this problem, and this is the research we are doing, okay, and Change Initiative as, you have to find a way of reducing the risk for politically unconnected investors. And you cannot do that by saying, let's do good governance and let's do that, and that is a 50-year program. You have to reduce the risk now. And there are some very simple ways, and we have evidence that it works. So one way of reducing risk is to give a line of credit at below market interest rates to anyone who wins that tender. So you say there is so many $1 million available for this contract at 3%, but this will be a competitive tender. You will build that into your pricing, and now you see what is the lowest price. Right. And that reduces, and we have seen this, we have evidence that it works. It reduces the risk of investors. More politically unconnected investors bid, price drops significantly. Similarly, in solar projects, we have seen that one of the big risks in Bangladesh is buying land, because buying land is a very time-consuming process. If you tell an investor you can make a solar plant, but you go and buy the land, the only people who will do it are politically connected people, because buying land requires a lot of political connections. But if you could say that this is the public land, we will lease it to you, already bought, and you have some credit in the way that I suggested, you may find a lot of politically unconnected investors from different countries willing to make a bid. We have to try these experiments. But to try these experiments, we go back to something I said this morning. You first have to break the power of the oligarchs, because they will not let these experiments work. They will block these experiments, they will have their ministers in their pocket, they will have the power division in their pocket, and no amount of technocrats will be able to crack this. So it is both a political challenge, you have to create the space for these experiments, you have to have some instruments which reduce risk, and then I think we can start moving. But the situation that we have now is unsustainable. Our power prices are 50% higher than our competitors, thanks to our dearly beloved Awami League, and they have left this mess on our heads. We have got these extremely competitive contracts with India. Indian power prices are extremely high. I'm shocked to hear you are selling power to India at 4 cents. They're exporting it to us at 8 cents to 10 cents. I mean, this is why we cannot have an energy market. Not till India becomes a proper country. No, this is a country which uses energy, power, and with Nepal, it uses access to the ports as a weapon. Right? They can blockade Nepal and shut Nepal off if they don't like what's up. So we have to be very careful of integrated anything with India right now. I am like Zakir, I think that we have to go for energy sovereignty. We have to have our own solar, we have to have our own capacity to generate power. Once we have that, we can then do trading with our neighbors. But we cannot be dependent on India. This would be a disaster. Because that is what has caused this massive dependence and overpriced power. So I will stop there. I think we have maybe some time for discussions.
Yeah. Thank